How do you merge a branch in Git on the command line? That's what we're going to cover in this video. So I'm going to pull open iTerm here. This is similar to Terminal. Hey, my name is Paul Solt from Super Easy Apps. I'm going to show you my workflow. This is what I did when I worked at GoPro. What I have is a long-running branch, and then I've got a main branch that has work that has been committed, and we now need to merge that back in. I'm going to show you how to do this on the command line. This works if you're working on a solo project and you don't need to use GitHub. I will probably do a separate video on how to do this with GitHub pull requests. But to start off, we need to understand how this all works on the terminal. And so we're going to get started with that. So up first, you need to make sure that your Git config is configured properly. So we're going to make sure that when we're doing pull requests, we are going to be using Rebase in this workflow. And so you can enable that by typing this command, git config global pull.rebase true. Okay, so this is going to go to your global config file. So this is going to be modifying it. It's modifying the setting pull.rebase and it's turning it on. You could also pass false if you didn't want this on, and then you're going to get merge points, which I do not like. So this will keep your commit history clean so that basically work is just sort of stacking up and you don't have like this chunk of work that then gets merged in. It just looks a lot better. It's easier to follow, in my opinion. All right, so doing that, we'll do that. The other thing we could do if you're not comfortable with that, or if you forget what that command is, you can always just open your home directory git config yourself just by typing open ~/.gitconfig. This is a hidden file in your home directory, which is that tilde, and this will open it up in something like text edit. And then in here, you will see all the different settings. So these are the settings that I have enabled. Let me just make this a little bit bigger. And we're going to see rebase is equal to true. So this is the pull command, and this is a setting for rebase being true. And then you can see all of my credentials there. Okay, so we can hit revert. I don't know what I changed here, so let's just close that out. Okay, so that's your Git config file. That'll put us in the proper place we need to be. Next up, we need to understand some simple Git commands, and I'm just going to run through them right now. So there's Git status, which is going to give us the status of whatever we're working on. So here I've made a change to my main branch, and so I'm one commit ahead of what is on the origin, which is the GitHub repository that I'm pushing my brew coffee code to. So this means I can do a push and send that up to the cloud. The other command that I'm going to go through is git diff. So if you have local work, we can run git diff, and this will tell us if anything is different. If you don't have anything, you won't see anything. I could touch file 2.txt. This is going to create a new file. And now if I ran git diff, sorry, we're not going to see it there. We're going to actually see that with git status. Diff is between files that we actually have in source control. So if I open file.txt, I can now add something new, save that. And now if we come back over here, so I'll just move this off to the side, we do git diff. This is going to tell us there's something different with one of our files that's being tracked. So I added in the last commit file.txt, but it was a blank empty file, and we just added a single line of text to it down here. So we could go ahead and add -u to add all of the changes, and we're going to see that this is now staged for committing, and we can then do a commit updated file.txt. And now if we do a git status, I have some keyboard shortcuts here. So GS will do git status for me. It's an alias. So git status will show us that we are now 2 commits ahead of the origin, and we have an untracked file. Now, if I don't want this untracked file, if we do, git status is showing us that we have that file. If we want to get rid of that, then we can just say rm file2.txt. This is a destructive operation. I think I've remapped this to always ask. So this will ask me, and I have to give it yes, no, y, or n. And then that will get rid of that file. So if I type git status now, we'll see that there are no local changes and we're clean. Okay, so git log is the other thing that's super useful when working on the command line. This will show you the most recent changes. So what we're going to see is my initial commit on main and then my updated file.txt that we just created. And this is ahead of the origin. So this is on GitHub. And so this is the origin version of main. So right now I have two different changes from that. And then we are seeing, looks like I have a master branch down here, and there's a version bump and extending the beta. So there's two commits there. Now I have a bunch of work on a branch that I want to merge into my main branch, and I'm going to show you now how to get into that flow. So the other thing that's handy is understanding what everything's looking like. And so like getting some context can be useful. So if we do a git log graph one line, this is an alternate way of getting a little bit more detail. And I can sort of see like the progression or the history. Sometimes there's long running things. You can see sometimes we have a branch that gets merged in, and we can see the different work. Okay, so that's git log. That helps us visualize. If you don't want to do that on the terminal, sometimes I use source tree. And so this just allows us to visually look at the same thing. It's very bright coming from the other one. I don't know if this has dark mode support or not, but you can see my main is right here. We saw that version bump for test flight and the master branch down here. And then right now we're seeing the test commit and this at the top. So these two are on top of this commit. And then we see side by side, there's a second branch that is my Swift data branch that I want to merge into main. And so all of this work was done, but I haven't merged it yet. And I want to do that. And then I have some changes that I've stashed that I then want to create a new branch from main. So let's close this. And we're going to get on to sort of a rebase workflow. So the first thing that you're going to want to do all the time is make sure that you've got the latest code, especially if you're on a team project. If you're on a solo project, this isn't as important unless it's been a while. You might want to check to see if you have any changes. So git pull, and I have mine set up since we added that rebase flag. It's technically going to do a git pull rebase, which means that any new changes will just get applied on top of what we have here. And you're not going to see merge points or anything weird. So that when you do git log, it's just going to sort of look normal. We have these two commits that don't exist on main yet on the origin, and I'm not going to push it just yet because I want to sort of make sure it works locally before I push it, so I don't mess something up. So we've pulled down the main. If you're working on a shared long-running branch, which we typically did when we were doing camera releases at GoPro, then you're going to want to make sure that if you're working in a team environment, that both developers or all three developers who are working the same feature are making sure that they pull down the latest before they do this, because you can trash other people's work and essentially delete it if you don't pull it down before you do the work. So I'm on main, and if we do a git branch, we're going to see that there is a Swift data and a main branch right here. And I'm going to do git checkout Swift data. And once I do that, if I was working in a team, I would do another git pull here just to make sure I have the latest. In case someone else had already rebased it, you could get into trouble. Make sure you don't have any working changes. So this is where git status and git diff are super useful. Sometime in big projects, you can get diff files because xcode is doing things, or the Swift lint is doing things, and different things could trigger your code to change. So that can mess up things a little bit. So now that we've pulled in, I typically do a Git Rebase Interactive. And so that is with this -i and whatever the branch name is. So since we have changes on the main branch locally, I want to rebase all of the work for Swift data branch on top of that. So if we do the git log one line, spelled that wrong, git log graph one line. what we want to do is get on top of whatever main is. And we don't actually see main in this list because we've kind of diverged from it, I believe. So it's actually an alternate tree. And we're going to have to rebase onto it. So we are going to type git rebase -i, and then we're going to do main. And so what this is going to do is going to take our current branch that we're in, which is Swift data, and rebase it on top of the changes in main. Now here, this can be a little bit tricky. Sometimes you need to drop certain commits when you do this. In this case, I want all of the commits that I've added. I'm not going to drop anything, but you can run into situations where sometimes you have to drop duplicate commits because they've already been merged. And that happens when someone else does this whole workflow for a long-running branch. Right now, we don't have to worry about that. So I'm just going, this is in Vim. And so a Vim keyboard shortcut to exit and save. So pick means we're going to use all of these commits. I don't want to lose anything, so I'm going to keep these here. There's different things that we can do to edit this. I will put you into edit mode, and we can start typing stuff right here. Whoops. So like if you wanted to take something out, we could use X to remove this, and you could say drop this. I don't want to do that, so let me just write pick real quick. And we're just going to do Shift ZZ to save. If you don't want to do any of these options, you actually have to delete all the text up at the top. You can do that with like the DD command, and that will delete a commit. If you accidentally don't want that, just press U to undo, and that will put it back. So I'm going to type escape to go into the command mode, and then we're going to do Shift ZZ to save. So that's going to rebase, and now you're going to see something that looks a little bit different. It's going to say that we're ahead by 20 commits, and so we had 18 commits in I think this branch, but now we're ahead by 20 because there was 2 that were on main that we then applied ours on top of. And so this branch now has 20 new commits, and it's going to say that it's behind 18 because there's 18 different commits in the branch on GitHub. So we've rewritten Git history, which means we have new commit hashes and everything, and they're totally different commits, even though they have the same logic, but they are now applied on top of the 2 commits that we had just taken on with us. And so this is where you get into trouble in a team environment if everyone's not on the same page of pulling down the latest and then working off of that. So at this point, as a safety net, I would test the app. So I would just make sure, like, does my app still build? Does it still work? And sort of go through that process. And then we're ready to potentially merge this back into main. And since we're working solo, we don't need to go into GitHub. So I'm going to show you how that works. Did that run? I didn't even see it open. Okay, there it is. So just make sure that things are working. So let's pull open the app. We see the app. We can click around. I've got some breakpoints. It looks like that we're set here. Let's hit continue. So switching that, testing this, hitting the start button, seeing it start, stopping a recipe, opening the details. Just run through whatever you would typically do to test, saving a recipe using Swift data. Great. So things are working, and now we're ready to move on to the merge step. Now that we've verified that we've got the latest, at this point, I would push. Now this is going to push rewritten commits to your long-running branch, and that's fine if you're the only one working on it. It gives you a safety net in case you lose your machine or you have a catastrophic failure. So it's a good sort of, it's a good thing to do on a regular basis because it gives you that peace of mind that you're not going to lose all the work that you've just worked on. So I'm going to push this up. And now we're going to run into an issue that it can't push this because it doesn't match what's on the remote. And so in this situation, I know I've rewritten history because I've done the Git Rebase to clean up my history on top of the main branch. So I'm going to force push it. Now you have to be careful. You have to let your team know that you're doing this, because if they have work on the server that they've already pushed, you're going to be rewriting it. And that's why it's really important to pull those changes down. It's also really important is before you start this process that you're talking to whoever else will change this code, so that they know that you are doing this update before they try and push something and mess up your whole workflow. So I'm going to do a git push and then force. And this is going to push those changes up to the server. It's rewritten the history. So now what we see on GitHub is going to be these all new commits. If we do a git log, we're going to see all of these commits, but we can't really see the detail without doing that graph one line. And now what we should see is main here has the commit for the updated file.txt and the test commit. So we see these two commits that were done locally. Those are not on the origin just yet because we're still sort of testing. We've now applied our code all on top of that. So this is all the Swift data commits are on top of that local version of main. And so now what we want to do is we want to merge this back into main and essentially move the main pointer up to this commit, since we've rewritten our history on top of main's latest. So we should be able to merge at this point. So from your terminal, you're going to switch to the other branch. A shortcut for that is to check out dash, and this will switch us over to main. Since I am going to be pushing, doing some destructive stuff, and if I want to make sure I have a safety net, I might push this up, let my team know that I've got some new changes, and then we will see if we run git status, I'm using my shortcuts here, that we are good to go. So at this point, I want to do git merge and then Swift data, and I'll press enter. And that's going to merge everything in. So now if we do a git log graph one line, we should now see the origin main has those two test commits. And that is now pointing to the last one. And then we see the Swift data stuff that I did, which are all of these commits. And now main and origin Swift data and Swift data should all be pointing to the same thing. So that is how we know that things are working. If we want to look at this one more time in source tree, I can open up source tree and we should see all of this. So main, our local main has been updated, but our remote main is still back at this last commit. So if everything works, and this is where I would go ahead and rerun everything, just give yourself a sanity check. Make sure things are working. Use the app. Then you're ready to push those changes to your server. So here we can quit with Q from this display. So the Q key will get out of this. And we can then go ahead and if we do a git status one more time as a sanity check, we see that our branch is ahead of main by 18 commits. Those are the 18 commits that I had on my Swift data branch. And now I'm going to push those to the GitHub repository. So git push. Now, if you have any kind of continuous delivery or continuous integration stuff that might queue off of you pushing to main, you might not have permission to push to main. So like this might not be possible for you. And I don't know why this isn't working. Okay, so this says that we're up to date with main. Let's just see what it looks like in source tree. And pull, push. Maybe it was bad for me to stop this here. I'm not exactly sure why that took so long or why it wasn't showing anything. Maybe it was just glitching out. I have the GitHub plugin installed, so I should be able to type gh, and then there's a bunch of different commands that we can run. So gh browse should open up the repository. This is a private repository that I have on GitHub, and this has my work. And so we should be able to see two branches here. So I see the main branch and oh, that's odd. I don't know why Swift data doesn't show up here. Okay, so that's a little bit about working with Git. You can do pull requests. I'll probably show an example of that. Oh, it does. Okay, so it shows an example of, I guess it automatically created a pull request for us. Interesting. Apparently I deleted the branch. I don't remember deleting the branch, but okay. I don't know if there's another setting that did that. Interesting. Okay. Something did some extra work here that I wasn't anticipating. But these are all of those commits. So if this was useful, hit the like button. If you want to learn more about Git or sort of this workflow, I'd be happy to talk more about it in another video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.